And we are live. Welcome everybody to another edition of Talking in Stations, the Aftershow. I have a bunch of people with me going down the list. Let me just check. We have Caleb in the house, and he's also on video right there on your right hand side. We have Carneris, who is also with us, sort of with us, but not quite with us because he's kind of in a fleet, so he'll be doing stuff. He won't be doing stuff, but he's also on video as well, like right next to me, just literally there. We have currency trader W, Les Rotiers, Maderal I think will be in and out whenever he gets the opportunity. We have Opus Magnum here. We also have Robbie Kaspersky, who is here but in the shadows, like a little further along from Carneris. There he is. And we also have Tiberius, who I think will be in and out of the conversations, but will be chilling out and giving us all his words of wisdom, as it were. So welcome everybody, and everybody say hi to everybody out there in Twitch land.
Hey people. Hi, thank you.
So yeah, if you guys ended up watching the Talking Station show, we had a bunch of topics. We had, the usual kind of headlines kind of stuff. We had the war in catch, how it's kind of fizzling down, fizzling out, or not fizzling out. We were doing a kind of an industry-based kind of show where we were kind of discussing, some of the finer points of industry. We can talk a lot more about that kind of stuff in various different other ways. Obviously, if you have any questions about industry, production, markets, that kind of thing, type it in chat. Hopefully one of our guys will see it, or I'll see it and sort of think, flag it up as a nice conversation starter, or something to dispel some myths. But yeah, floor's open to whatever topic you guys want to talk about. So let's start with current events. And why not? Let's start with the war on catch, or the what was touted to be the war on catch, but it's kind of like is a war or not a war? I don't know. How do you guys feel?
You're stepping around the whole topic of naming the war. Is that intentional?
I let's not name the war at the at the start of the war. Let's name the war when we actually kind of get a little bit of a feel as to what are the main kind of themes of the war, right? So I don't mind calling it the war on catch. Totally fine by me.
It's the big bait war.
Well, yeah.
Come closer, and then rumble stomp.
Why don't you guys have a war first and then give it a name?
I'm in a fleet war
at the moment.
Because that's not the way it works anymore. You have to name things before they happen.
Isn't that what a campaign is? Like you name wars after wars, but you name campaigns before the campaign starts.
Oh, that's a good point. We should just then everyone can name the campaign exactly the way they want.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's how wars work. I mean, you have Operation Overlord, but now it's called World War II, or D-Day.
Okay,
exactly.
I'm gonna get trivial about something here. D-Day in this stands for Disembarkation Day. It's used in any sort of amphibious invasion, so it always bugs me when people refer to the beginnings of the Overlord invasion of northern France as D-Day, because that's just the day you get off boats. Nothing more.
Yeah,
so if you really want to be pedantic, Overlord was the name of the operation before the landing itself, and the D-Day is the start of an operation, D4 day. Doesn't have to be a landing.
I think the larger point, which is really interesting, is name your campaigns anything you want, guys. The war will be named later.
Yeah.
But the thing is, let's take the Winter War, right? Media jumped on that name, or maybe someone else was using it, and now that is the name of the war. I mean, we kind of did it to ourselves this time.
This is true. This is very, very true.
So I think this is where the media has to be responsible and say that, the war in, this part of Eve. Because, when we say the Winter War, we really don't talk about where exactly this war is taking place at, really. We just say the South and North. the battle reports say where they're happening, but we don't really talk about them in our articles about, oh, it's a winter war. We don't ever keep addressing where it's actually taking place at least not the articles that I've read.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Seems to be kind of fairly logical. But yeah, like, I mean, what do you guys sort of think about, what's going on at the moment in Catch?
People are getting their assets burned and widening the gap to Dell, in my opinion.
Well, there's a kind of an interesting sort of thing in terms of what goons are kind of doing in Catch and that kind of thing, and there was a little bit of a question mark as to what goons are doing now in comparison to what they were doing literally like say a week ago, or like a couple of weeks ago sort of thing, because they were very much into the war at the time, and now they're kind of like tiptoeing around it sort of thing. I don't know whether anybody wants to shed light on that or whether wants to sort of speculate on that. I mean, it's all good. Like, Conaris, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I'm in a fleet right now in that war.
I
don't know what we're doing next. I'm trying to split my attention a little bit between the show and the comms.
That's all cool, man. That's all cool.
If you see me, I'm in a Sleipnir. Shoot me. But,
Conaris is primary. Everyone, Conaris is primary.
I'm on an alt. I'm not.
Damn! Then it's not funny.
Well, I think what Caleb was getting at, I think, when he brought it up was, is this basic war is Goons Forum inviting everybody to fight against them because they have such a military industrial complex now that they need to burn out all that casino cash that came in? It's just a good opportunity to do that. Because
that's what it smells like to me, right? Yeah. Because Pandemic Horde is already about to run out of money and now panicking on trying to find income in high sec. And I don't think they're alone. I don't know. Some of the big ones, PL and NC, of course, most likely very comfortable still. But they're basically burning assets. And while they are the main producers and they're getting those numbers out of Dell, that means that they are basically printing money and wealth, exactly like the casinos did, just now in-game.
That's kind of funny. That's kind of funny because essentially what you're saying there is they found a way to create that in-game kind of wealth of resources, but in a legitimate way, right, Caleb?
Yeah, it's a totally traditional way of making wealth in EVE. That's actually throwing manpower at the different things that are faucets, right. And they have been doing that in a very, very impressive and almost scary way. So much so that even though you could say that I'm pro-goon, in this case, I actually think that we might need some CCP intervention because this is massive.
Well, it's unfair to say casinos were illegitimate because they weren't until they were. So it was.
They were because there was scams, right?
I'm not gonna lie that. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie that there were casino style stuff that I actually I liked. I did partake in one or two of them. I did partake in I'm not generally one of those kinds of people who enjoys games of chance, as it were. Like complete chance, sort of, like roulette style kind of roulette wheel kind of style chance thing. But I always thought like the Eve Hold'em and the Eve Poker kind of stuff was, legitimately fine because it's a game of skill, right? And I mean, I'm not entirely certain whether that kind of falls falls outside of the frame of what.
If you take BIG, right? If you take BIG, EOH, and EveBet, those were practically fair and balanced games, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Well, there was some sort of oversight, and it didn't come off as something iffy or questionable when it came to metrics and code and stuff like that. Because they had a long record and were pretty transparent on most of the things they did, right? So it was very different from a gambling perspective, but we didn't have any insight with things like what's the scandal before the whole
Summerbling.
Yeah, Summer Blink, we didn't have any insight into. We didn't have any insight into Iron Bank or I Want ISK and any of those services, right? They could have had like 50% rate. You didn't know. You had no way of knowing. And the things that Noisy would have been writing about if he wasn't actually supposed to be a neutral party would have been scary, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I mean, getting that insider's perspective of what's going on is critical, like really, really critical.
The thing I think where things went wrong, like EveBet as an organization was entirely benign as a group, and the other people that were doing it, but Summer Blink and I Want ISK started involving themselves in Eve politics.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't have done that, they probably would have carried on doing whatever they were doing. But here you go, guys with all this ISK, and they were like, well, what do we do with it? And whereas EveBet was kind of...
Well, actually, there's a question.
Funny if you didn't notice.
Actually, that's a question.
Suddenly turned everyone to pro casinos.
That's the question. Like, did they, like, would you say that they specifically started, like, you know, all the ruckus, or would you say that Space Monkeys did? Because that's the question. I mean, you know, essentially, you know, were they proactive in terms of like getting into the political side of thing, or were they just being
bankers
reactive?
were. I mean, Lenny says he was active before the SMA thing went down. He was already trying to gather up people to attack the Imperium. So the intention was already there. And Lenny was already there.
And Summer Blink did their own thing as well. They got involved in some Eve politics too, yeah. I don't remember what now, but yeah.
I think it's a combination. You're right. And it's a combination of two things. One is the scale. Like, you know, if you're gambling and it's maybe it's just out of sight so people don't know how much money they've always been making, but it seems like they're making a ton of money now as opposed to the 5-card draw, you know, monies that were being made, the lottery monies that were in corporations, the big lotto. Those were always millions, billions. Here's a Titan or two. It wasn't hundreds of millions and billions or trillions that people could see. But you put that scale and then you apply politics to it and you created something that needed to be dealt with. On the flip side, goons have so many people and so much activity that, you know, is that scale now distortion? Like, is that too big?
And
does that need to be dealt with?
Well, I think Eve has always proven that the size of its groups and its organizations always generally tend to be self-regulating in one way or another. You know, as groups go quiet and start losing numbers, and you pull in other groups, and groups evolve and change all the time, and then you have like fallout and betrayals and robberies and all that sort of stuff, you know. I mean, everybody thought Bob was entirely unassailable, and we know what happened there. So, you know.
Well, there was a degree of unassailability.
No one seemed to let the voice of reason out with those casinos. I'm not saying that I was never fundamentally against gambling. I actually have wanted to have CCP run gambling in the game since like forever, since it was teased about in beta. The point is that these entities came in with something that smelled like scams, but because they were funding wars, suddenly if you criticized them, you were pro-goon.
I think that was just the politics of the time. That wasn't necessarily it's only because, but like I said, it's just because they got involved with the politics. If they hadn't started funding wars, if they had kept a low profile, like EOH Poker did, like EveBet did for all those years.
Those entities were not involved in suspicious activities, in my opinion. Ever.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, there's that as well. And of course, it's found out to be they were, I Want ISK was involved in something because they ended up getting banned for it. So,
that's Noisy was trying to point this out, and many others were trying to point this out. I tried to argue it in Crossing Zebras Discord about what you would see if you started digging for some evidence. But the point is, they kept saying you need bulletproof evidence. It's like, you can't have that because you don't have access to their servers and you don't have CCP's numbers. So you would never be able to get that kind of proof. You can only get the circumstantial proof, and the circumstantial proof was showing very strange winners every week in those games, and very strange contracts and losses that tied back to the same people. So it reeked of something iffy, as I call it. I don't want to say that it's all RMT. I'm just saying that there was definitely something going on that was not above board. And we did not have any way of knowing what the rake was on these programs running. So it was questionable and obscure from the beginning. And I don't understand why that suddenly made you pro-goon, just because you said these guys do not run a fucking clean ship.
Just because of the way the politics were at the time. You know, I mean, it was just the environment of the war at the time, you know, where, you know, the heroes of the day were the Money Badger Coalition, supported by the casinos, and the baddies were the people that opposed the casinos and were in the part of the Imperium. So that's literally it. I don't think it was anything more complicated than that, to be fair.
Yeah,
just people drawing lines in the sand.
Yeah, it was people drawing lines in the sand. There's also that kind of element of like what is it? It's like there's a saying sort of like where, like, you know, what people see is reality. Like, you know, sort of the perception is reality, right?
The perception gap, yeah.
So, like, in a lot of the situation, right? Yeah, in a lot of situations. So, a lot of people kind of saw that kind of way of sort of saying, like, well, if we have to politicize it, and, you know, we want to sort of, you know, get it to be going the way that we want it to be going, then you kind of need to make sure that. Yeah, it does. But that depends
creates
entirely
another
on
one of those. CCP has had, like, what now? It's the third phobia that's arisen from CCP side. The first one was to not really feel like they wanted to do promotion of EVE players. They're over that phobia now, but they used to have it, right? Then you had the other one, which was the whole walking in station thing, and in Kana, that they also got phobia from, because the player base, the vocal ones, were bitching like little children. And now you have the casino. So it's going to take a long time before CCP starts revisiting the idea of actually having casinos run in EVE. Just like they have basically shelved the entire idea of having a proper Incarna functionality in EVE.
And if casinos do come back in EVE, they're going to be part of the game, and it's going to be in this sync for the game.
Yeah, but it's going to take a long time, because now they're fucking scared of it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is true. This is all very valid, yeah. So, I'd like to... Oh, sorry, what was that? Oh, it's Carneros. Okay, fair enough.
Very quiet.
I was just like, someone wanting to make on a point kind of thing.
But can we get back to the thing we missed from the Talking in Station show?
Go for it. I was gonna segue into industry in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, because we didn't get around the whole CCP please thing, and I know that Carneros wanted to mention a few things and ideas and hopes.
Hopefully, unless he's tied up.
No, I'm okay to talk at the moment. We're just free burning somewhere. I don't. It's okay. The question is, I don't know where I'm going. One request we had from our team was, CCP please, in the structure browser, if you could split out the industry checkbox to separate the rest of the industry functions from invention and TE and ME research. Because sometimes someone is looking for a structure out of a massive list, the stuff scales up, is looking for a structure for research. Sometimes they're looking for a different industry thing, and that would be a helpful request. Also, obviously, please reconsider the whole Tech 1 and Tech 2 rigs components for engineering complexes. Maybe I shouldn't go through the whole list at once. Maybe people want to talk about it, but also please consider rebalancing the ice compositions again now that you've changed the relative layout of consumption.
And I don't know what you think about this, Carneros, because I'm going to give a little bit of a rant. I think I touched upon it when we talked last about the fact that CCP, in my opinion, has flipped the whole idea of where to put bottlenecks and limitations. So now you have infinite slots in stations instead of having finite slot that you used to in the past. It made sense to solve the problem of lagging slots or the
ridiculous length of time that you'd have to wait for a slot to come available.
Yeah, exactly. The waiting and the queuing was a major problem for research slots and industry slots. But when we now have player-owned structures, this is no longer a problem. So now we can get back to actually having facilities have a limitation. So they should actually flip it around, saying that players have infinite slots on their character skill-wise, but there is a limitation of slots in space based on how much players are making new structures and what the costs are.
Yeah. I think one of the things is that there was a little bit of a precedent for that previously, because there was always a case of people having to create their own kind of research slots by putting down a high sec player in station and putting some kind of some laboratories up and stuff like that in order to actually get it. So there's a precedent in that.
I had a strong suggestion that I think people would actually like, because it actually ties into both player versus player stuff and NPC stuff. If they tied in the number of slots in a station to the number of offices rented, you would suddenly get a whole new dynamic, because you would tie in NPC or player versus player rents with the number of facilities that appear in the stations.
Yeah, but even then, in some places, only 15 offices would be kind of a limiting factor. If it were like something like 50, then it would probably get to a reasonable dynamic.
Yeah, that would be matched. If the number of offices rented was high enough, the number of slots that became available would be increasing.
Or you pop down a Citadel and rent your offices in there.
Ka-ching.
Yeah, of course. And then that's the whole balance of NPC cost versus player cost. So you can take the money back into the system instead of sinking it out.
But you're always kind of in a situation where you are asking people to risk their assets by putting them into a station that can technically be blown up.
Oh, wow.
Even though it's quite awkward and very difficult, but it's not like it hasn't happened before.
Yeah, but the risk is minimal. If there's an NPC station in the same system, it's not a problem. You could just asset safety it.
Yeah.
For free. That's something I never got. I never understood why it was free to move it from a Citadel in a station to an NPC station. It should always cost something to move it to an
Indeed,
NPC
I agree.
station.
It should have a small percentage cost always.
Yeah.
Isn't there a cost getting it out though?
No, if your Citadel is in the same system as an NPC station, and your Citadel gets blown up with your stuff in it, and it gets asset recovered to the NPC station that's in the same system, there is no cost to recover it from asset safety. Which is why you see Citadels, like a bulk of Citadels in HiSec, are always in NPC stations.
Personally, I would like it to be a flat 2% to move it, and then plus 1% per jump range to an NPC station.
Or per light, yeah.
Part of me wishes that you didn't really have asset protection with Citadels. Kind of like how Posses didn't have asset protection. Maybe I'm just bitter because of a little wormhole space. Maybe that's the problem. But it's kind of crazy that you can put everything in this big giant structure and then you blow it up and then everything is transferred safely to an NPC station.
Oh, no, the reasoning behind that is really simple. It's because they're going to be removing stations from null.
Well, yes. I totally get that, but when that happens, what happens then when you destroy the Citadel? That asset protection won't be there anymore unless they have another Citadel up.
Well, that's just it. When they take the stations out of null, everything in those stations is going to asset safety. And that's important because CCP isn't going to say, okay, you were unsubbed for 3 years. All your stuff is gone.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons for the system, because so many people were saying, hey, I come back after 3 years and I can't get my stuff out because my alliance doesn't own this system anymore, or my alliance died, or I got kicked out of alliance.
I do think that things that are in production and in use should actually not go into asset safety. That's just my personal view. Whether it's on markets or in industry, it should drop as loot.
I thought stuff that was being built, all you got back was the blueprint.
Just the raw materials, not the blueprint.
Raw materials.
Yeah, but for the market, it wouldn't make sense because you could just remove the orders, and that's just annoying to dodge, but it doesn't stop anything really.
The thing is, it is a negative draw against the actual people, utilizing it though. That's the thing. So,
Renders, would you go back to the point you were trying to make in chat? Because I really want to hear the details of that. I think I missed most of it.
Oh, about the salvage and such?
Yeah, I think that was the one you were commenting on.
Well, it's just it's one of the things that's missing in EVE warfare. If you look at the history of warfare, naval warfare has been a little bit different, obviously, because things sink and you can't get to them. But terrestrial warfare has always had that recovery phase where you go out, you go searching for the wounded, you scavenge the bodies. Napoleon's army would collect all of the rifles and muskets from the dead. I mean, everything was collected for the quartermasters to reuse. And
exactly.
that's been true
all the spoils of war,
we
right?
don't have that.
Well, originally the spoils of war were the fire sale contracts for people stuck in stations. It's like...
Well, sure, but at the same time, I mean, like, okay.
Wow.
It's just salvaging. Salvaging could be so much more. For example, okay, if you look at Pearl Harbor, a whole lot of battleships were sunk, right? I mean, bam, those things are sunk. The vast majority of them were also refloated, dragged to dry dock, repaired, and fought in the war.
It actually ties into something that I have been dreaming of for a long time. I was very interested in getting containers to be actually used in shipping in a more natural way. So when you have something in a container, it always drops. So there's never destruction, which means that you would have a whole new loot scenario and a whole new way of balancing things like freight, logistics, and aggression and things like that.
Yeah. Also, the thing about salvaging and being important to control the battlefield. That's a point that's well taken, but shouldn't push the analogy too far. Like, for example, in Pearl Harbor, if the fleet had sailed out, then there'd have been no recovery. So it'd be like the equivalent in EVE would be like when you've got big fight and it's near a celestial, so people are going to be able to scavenge it. On the other hand, if you fight, it's never going to be a big fight, obviously, but you've got a fight, you gank a guy, it's in the middle of nowhere, and then nobody bookmarks the location, and then the salvage could just be lost.
Sure, unless
Salvage
somebody's
scanning.
down the racks.
I'd rather say the opposite, like being able to probe wrecks, except should be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, totally.
Like to go treasure hunting. But it should be difficult.
I would like that. That would be enjoyable, scanning down like wrecks and going and salvaging the stuff that people don't pick up.
That would have to be difficult. I mean, you should not be able to hunt a guy this way. You'd have to be able to scan his ship.
Yeah, but both range scanning for wrecks, but also prospecting the wreck, right? So when you scan it, just like with voids, so you don't chase the small ball stuff. You only go for the shinies and only track to those, right?
Let the ship scanner tell you what the salvage is going to turn out.
Exactly, or a dedicated new one. That would be fine. I think the scanners in general need a little bit of a buff, so they're more useful.
Yeah, I never understood why they never gave you the ability to scan down wrecks. I never got that at all. Like, you could scan down ships, you could scan down anomalies, but you couldn't scan down wrecks. Didn't get it.
I quite like the idea of being able to scan down wrecks because it's instead of like removing the ability to, let's say, like how I kind of said like bookmark recs, it's more of an enabling kind of factor. It kind of enables people more. It gives more kind of areas for people to either like specialize in or to create some kind of profession in, that kind of thing. Like
exactly. And I think it's actually the only module that you should be able to activate without aggression in HiSec.
Oh, what, salvages?
No, scanners. Scanners. The only thing that you should be able to do always, that it's legal. You can scan whatever you like, ships, whatever.
Isn't that already the case?
No,
I think so.
No, it's an aggression, right? That's why you need it.
No, it's not. You can all the gankers that scan your ship, they don't aggress.
They don't get as aggression.
So it's all good.
Isn't that because they use passive ones?
No. They're all active.
The
It's just yeah, they're all active. They're all active modules. It's just whether you target someone passively or not, and have a passive targeter on you. That depends entirely. Like,
and even then, quite often, if you're floating around, hauling stuff around, you'll see a guy on a gate lock you up and yellow box you, but you won't see an aggression timer.
Yeah, they just basically.
My point is that that's sneaky scanning versus active scanning, so you actually know that you're being scanned. I think that there should be a big difference.
Well, there's no real sneaky scanning. Like, the only thing is, like, the only kind of difference is whether you notice someone like actively locking you, or whether you see someone because there's a big difference. Like when someone fits a passive targeter on them on a ship, one of the fallacies, one of the kind of myths of a passive targeter is that whatever you do when you lock people, like, they won't see a target lock or anything, but it is the case when you start using an active module against that person. So whether that is guns, whether that's missiles, whether that's ECM, or whether that's a module that doesn't actually, isn't actually an aggressive mechanic like a scanner. So people can use passive targeters to passively target you, but as soon as they hit that scanner, the target kind of yellow box does actually appear. Off. Yeah, it turns off. So, and that's the thing. It's a case of, do the passive targeters are too well named or too literal in their naming, kind of thing. Like passive lobby would be good.
Maybe have a passive scanner that would be less effective, and an active one that you would see, like, would not give you aggression, but you'd see the visual effects. It'd be.
Doesn't the ship scanner already have a visual effect to it?
It does have a visual effect. I think it has a small but very slight visual effect. It's not noticeable. It's not noticeable in the same way, like, if you start ganglix up, like, it's nothing like that. But they do have an effect. It's just very subtle.
Okay, never seen it. I'll try paying more attention.
But yeah, but this is
good.
Sorry.
So I guess to kind of get away from what we're talking about the scanning things, going back to the actual contents of the salvage itself. Mm-hmm. Do you guys feel that there's ways that CCP can improve what is pulled out of Rex via salvagers to make it something that's more along the lines with what you're getting at right now, which is make it a big tool to recover a lot of resources after a battle?
I think that it should be a little bit like stacked, right? So the different salvage in a wreck, when you've scanned it and you've got the information on what is actually in it, then it should take it in the order of value. So it takes the cheap stuff first. So you actually need to dig your way to the morsels in the center, right?
Yeah. There was a long time ago, I actually I had a kind of an idea in terms of like redistributing kind of how wrecks kind of occur. Like, I don't know whether you guys kind of like how you guys would feel like about this, but like essentially the idea was like not to have individual wrecks, but kind of like it turns into sort of like a wreck field, because I always found it really strange how you've just literally annihilated this ship, for example, and there's a cataclysmic explosion, parts go flying everywhere, but
and it leaves a
strangely
nice
enough,
little neat box.
nice and little neat box with a neat pile of stuff, and there's no kind of extraneous stuff around. So I always kind of thought
that actually makes sense. So it's generic and size based, and then you might only get the information on what it was when you scan it.
Yeah,
that could actually solve the scanning problem with hunting people as well. What you do is each wreck contributes to a debris field object, and the larger the debris field, the easier it is to scan down.
Exactly, that would be even more entertaining. And then personally, I do think that the idea of committing to your salvaging or committing to your mining could actually be something that could be a little bit wider. I wouldn't be opposed to putting different variation of minerals in ore. So the longer you actually mine an asteroid, you get different types of ore.
So it would almost be like a soft siege cycle in a way that if you really do want to get the maximum value out of it, you have to stay at it and stay on grid for a very long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I would let them deplete on a metric that I've talked about before. I would basically make all static void belts like 25 times larger as a default value-wise, and then I would let them respawn on a 30-day tick when they've been depleted completely.
Right, because how would real asteroid mining would work? The outside asteroid would be just the crap stuff that you see everywhere. Once you get to the inside of it, it's where the good stuff would be at. That takes time though and dedication.
Or at the very least, the outer layers would be the lighter stuff, and you get denser as you go in.
Exactly.
Right.
And that would mean that depletion could also be weaponized, right? So depleting fields would be something that you could do to aggress an opponent, a neighbor, and stuff like that.
You could literally, in almost a literal sense of burning the fields, right?
Exactly. Or Flight of the Locusts, where, I could imagine that goons field all their fleets with just ventures and just go numbing, not to actually bring it back home, but just to destroy it.
I would say there would have to be some form of mechanic that to sort of somehow counteract something of that form.
Yeah, it's called a Titan with a Doomsday. Boom.
Well, yeah, I know, but that's a very kind of extreme example. But without kind of going too far, certain groups, vis-a-vis goons, would probably turn that into a serious griefing mechanic, or literally going around and killing every single asteroid field in certain areas, kind of thing.
But groups already do that
to some degree.
I know groups in wormhole space, and have for years, who will go and open up wormhole chains just to scan down and open up every anomaly, every grav site, and 3 days later they're all gone.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's always a downside, right? It's not like there's no benefit from this, because man hours spent doing Flight of Locusts is lost on actually creating value.
There is also that, yeah. But that also depends on man hour. That raises the bar of difficulty in terms of man hours. So it's one of those one of those things where only the larger of the groups are the larger the group, the less affected they are, kind of thing in that regard. Whether that's positive or negative in terms of the majority of the people in EVE is to be debatable. It is very debatable, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but that's going to be unavoidable no matter what you do. No matter what the situation is, the larger groups are always going to be able to adapt more readily to it. They just have the manpower and the brain power to throw at the problem.
That's a really, really good point, actually.
I do think that the whole argument of endless simplification and making EVE easier to sort of somehow counter the goons is not really a good argument, because it's actually the other way around. The more you allow for specialization, the more you can actually challenge a big group that only has man hours to throw at something.
Actually, yeah, I could see that as well. You know, in that kind of sense, you also, well, it's there's always that kind of question about simplification of Eve and mechanics and that kind of thing. Dropping it to the lowest common denominator and all that.
Because that makes man hours more powerful, right? If the complexity is gone, so you don't, and then of course you can say, well, but then they can just counter it with organizational stuff and knowledge stuff. Yeah, but then anyone can do that, right? That's something anyone can do. Everyone can have access to or do their own research and create competition that way. But not everyone can get 20,000 players to go and throw hours at something.
Yeah, not many orgs can do that.
So it is the only way to compete, right? If it is to specialize and open the field in that direction.
Well,
I think just like everything that you run into in games where you make a change to benefit newer players, it's inevitably going to benefit older players to a larger degree to a certain extent. And I think you would run into the same thing here if you try and change the dynamic of some things to basically take more manpower. Well, older players are typically going to have access to more characters, access to possibly larger entities, and it then becomes okay, now I'm throwing this manpower that I was throwing at one thing to another. A good example here would be the changeover from AFK carrier ratting with geckos or whatever to rorquals, where that was really a change that benefited the people who already were set up to run 10 plus chimeras up in Delve are now running the same sort of thing down in Declan. I'm sorry, up in Declan are now running the same sort of thing down in Delve.
Yeah. But then there's also those kind of groups that well, in that sort of sense, there was also people changing from carriers up in Declan and changing to rorquals down in Delve. They did dip into the sort of skill point extractors and injectors very heavily in order to do that. So there's a kind of a hit, like a ISK sync kind of in that regard, and also obviously a skill point sync in that regard as well. But like there's that kind of change of people being able to swap their skills to and from various different things, so long as they're endowed enough with SP to be able to do that. But
sure, but at the same time, those established groups are the ones who are going to have they're going to have the skill points to reapportion, and B, they're going to be the ones who can afford the skill injectors to do that.
Yeah, and it all kind of feeds into this, the perception that like trying to actually put together something that helps newer players ends up helping or enabling the older kind of players, the older, more established, larger groups. This is the Malcanus's law at work, essentially. Like,
yeah, but it's always going to happen that way. No matter what change you make to the game, to any game, the larger, more experienced, more organized groups of players are always going to benefit more because they have the capacity to exploit it better.
Which brings on the topic that was also brought up earlier today, right? The whole thing of who's actually winning the hearts and minds of the alphas, right? Where the biggest winners in that game seems to be groups like Signal Cartel, Eve University, and Goons.
The people who are making sure that they are tapping into that resource, because at the end of the day, it is a resource.
But they're offering a service, right? They're offering something to these people. That's why they are winning that war. It's nothing else. And this is what most Eve players have a problem figuring out when it comes to things in Eve, that they think everything is a scam or an angle. They have not thought it through and said, okay, I want to create a service for someone. And this is why you see the people that do that tend to win, whether you're talking the Synergy group or Signal Cartel or Eve University or Goons and the New Bro friendly group, right?
Totally.
Sure. I think probably the biggest thing there is that ultimately what all this comes down to is, as we've been discussing, man hours. And alphas and such are a major source of that, both in what they can do as alpha accounts and the benefit organizations get from taking in alpha players, giving them an environment to learn the game, to figure out that, yes, this is something I really enjoy as a person. I enjoy playing this game. I'm going to spend some money on it. It was mentioned somewhere very early on, like either right after alphas came out or before they came out, or shortly before they came out, where it was like, hey, these guys that are coming in now and are going to be flying, frigates and cruisers and destroyers and just doing that, somewhere in there, we're going to find a guy who's going to be multi-boxing Titans in 3 years. And we need to be the organization that comes in, takes that guy up and says, hey, here's a support infrastructure to help you learn this wonderful game that we all love to hate, because one of you is inevitably going to drop a ton of money on this, and we want to be the benefactor of that.
I'd actually like to ask Rendis and Robbie how you feel about making the gap between Omega and Alpha even smaller, right?
What do you mean by making the gap between Omega and Alpha even smaller?
Letting them have access to even more stuff. Basically saying, okay, let's just blanket give them access to all T1 basic stuff. So the only limitation would be like high level Tech 2 and end level supers.
Well, what I think the CCP set themselves up for here, and somebody's touched on it before, is I think eventually they might go into changing the number of clone states that exist.
Yep.
Where it won't just be alphas and omegas anymore. There'll be an option to, hey, a one-time unlock to say you get to use one additional race, or hey, you get to fly up to battleships now. And that would be, at least from where I'm sitting, which is in no way related to game development in the slightest, it would be a way to sort of increase the ability for people to enjoy the game in certain ways.
Oh, I can see endless variations on options for clone states. For example, the beta clone. The beta clone is an alpha clone, except you pay $1 a month for that subscription, and because it's not an alpha clone, you can now log him in and your other clients.
Yeah, the whole creating granulation and maybe even options to open things permanently by, say, using Plex or Aurum.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I think CCP is going to go once they've got enough data to really say, okay, alpha clones work. Because right now, I think it's still early to say that alpha clones are a long-term win. I think that they've got to see how well it translates into omegas, how much retention there is just as alphas. It's gonna take a bit, and they're also going to want to look at IP usage. How many of these alpha clones are regular players who are just setting up an alpha clone for some purpose or other.
I really like that idea because it potentially also gives a very, very good revenue stream to CCP without being unfair.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's not like sort of you're enabling huge swathes of people with alpha clones. Like, it's an opt-in situation. It's not like an opt-in situation where it's free of charge. Like, it actually brings in some revenue for CCP, and it doesn't overly change the dynamics.
And if it's still tied into the Plex Aurum conversion thing, so you can still do it with in-game activity, that's actually really, really good. It's almost as novel, in my opinion, as Plex was when it was introduced.
That would be cool. I really like that idea.
I could see a whole set of different plexes in effect.
Yeah, so if you want to specialize in say Logi, you unlock all the way up to almost the end tier of Logi. There might be a tier that you actually need an almost Plex-like subscription price-wise per month, but just very far up that chain, if you can unlock that, so you specialize as an alpha, that would be extremely engaging.
Like a logistician's license extension.
I see where that would come from in terms of being something that's beneficial, but at the same time, I think it would make the giving of money to CCP a lot more complex of an option. And I'm not sure that CCP necessarily wants that. So I think we would continue to see where the money to make these things happen is either going to be something that becomes one-time activations on an account, like around, like we were talking about with, hey, now you can buy access for your Galente alpha clone to use Amar ships or something like that. Or we're going to
tie it directly into certificates, right? So you buy access to certificate levels.
Yeah, that could work. I'm just thinking in terms of, I don't think CCP is going to introduce a ton of different options for, you have the ability to do that logi stuff. It would be something that I would see them coming more off of. It's an item that's like created from Plex in the game itself, rather than having it be something that's discreetly purchased. So that way, anybody who wants to throw additional money into the game can either do it via subscription or a Plex, and that Plex will just get turned into something that can create more items in game with, or something along those lines.
You have to be careful though, because you also don't want to make it so complex or so tiered that when you come into it, you go, oh, you should just buy this bundle because this bundle is easier than, cherry picking this or that, like Call of Duty does, right? Like they give bundles because there's so much crap out there to buy individually. You don't want that. Or maybe you do, but I don't find that stuff appealing.
Yeah, I guess to kind of throw a similar thing in there, I know one of the biggest complaints around the cash shop for some other games, and I'm going to call out World of Tanks here as an example, is that they'll release, these rare tanks that don't come out very often in the cash shop, but they'll be bundled with, a bunch of gold, a bunch of credits, all this other stuff, and it'll just jack the price of this rare tank way up. And people always got furious when they did that, because they were like, you're giving me all this extra crap that I don't actually want. I want just this one thing, and I would hesitate. I would be very disappointed in CCP if they went down a similar route when they do have this vehicle for not only ensuring that people can give them money, which is always important because they are running a business, but that the way in which they're giving the money can be changed into a bunch of different other items.
Right. I don't want to log on one day and say, oh, it's the rare Tech 2 frigate bundle, and you get the skin plus the ability to fly it plus 3 plex. You have to pay for all of it. It's like $80 instead of just going to buy the skin or the frigate for like $5.
Opening the option is not the same as messing with the in-game ecosystem.
I mean, like
you don't buy items directly in EVE in any way, so it's not the same thing, right? If you buy access to Fly Tech 2, that does not mean you get Tech 2 from your Plex. You still need a player to build it for you, and I hope that CCP does not move away from that. Buying access with things like tiered unlocks or subscriptions and stuff like that, I think that's perfectly valid. That gives you the option to then be part of that gameplay, but it does not mess in any way with the ecosystem.
But the thing is, though, with the Aurum store or the New Eden store, as they call it, it's so easy to spawn stuff in the game. Like CCP has the ability to do that, and that's my biggest fear, is that they're going to go for the cash grab. Not that they never have, but I mean, you look at who's ahead of what, marketing, PR.
There's a lot more money in the other option that we've just discussed than to try and spawn things in game. Spawning things in game destroys your gameplay, and I don't think CCP is that stupid. But granting players access for money actually motivates them to stay in the game, which actually brings them even more potential clients and money. So I don't think that they will ever start just spawning free stuff in space. They've not done that historically for the last 14 years. They've had a few fallouts, but nothing major. They've not messed with the ecosystem like that intentionally.
Well, I mean, you do have a couple
never
ships.
had the ability to do it, though. Now they do.
Well, you've always had a couple ships that have come in through that sort of thing, like the Gnosis and the Sunness. Some of these things that we got with the Ascension update.
But they're never really great ships.
Well, and they're also ships that you can't obtain any other way. It's not like they're going and giving out Ravens or Punishers or something like that. They're not giving away ships.
Yeah, it's not like they're throwing every single person in New Eden and Macarial kind of thing.
Actually, at this point now, they have done that. They have
Ventures.
They just gave out a bunch of ventures, which you can get otherwise. But that's
There's
really,
also the
they're so
starter packs you
ubiquitous
can buy
already.
as well.
Yeah, but those are so ubiquitous already. It's not
But
important.
those
But
are
I do
T1s.
just want to point out. Someone just said, I'm worried that they'll go for the cash grab. Not that they ever have. Monocle Gate was exactly about the cash grab.
That's a truth with a few modifications, right?
I was there, I was involved, and no, it wasn't. That was more about Hilmar's EP. He didn't like seeing that I had proposed the price to be $20 for that monocle, and it was supposed to be the big expensive thing on that. But that didn't match his self-image and his vision for how fabulous Eve was, and it had to be something fancier, and he wasn't caring about the revenue. He only cared about literally about the EP factor.
Well,
On Obtainium.
He forgot about the fact that microtransactions should still be micro.
No, that's a literally, sorry, a silly thing.
Really?
Transactions should be any size that the player wants. You should give people what they want in a game like this, but in a way that's balanced and doesn't wreck the game. Like when we built the NEX stores, and I'm talking from the time when I was a CCP dev, we had the what was the Scorpion blueprint that got the
Ishikon,
other?
was it?
Oh yeah, it was the Ishikon.
We had a whole setup with Ishikon Watch outfits to wear and Ishikon Watch Scorpion skins, and the way it would work is it would be in that store and you could buy it, but you couldn't buy the ship. You had to show up at one of those stores with Aurum, with a Scorpion hull, and possibly with loyalty points for the faction, and then you trade them into that store and you get back this ship, because that would you get back the upgraded ship, because we didn't want to mess with logistic supply chains in different parts of space. We didn't want to make it possible for you to pull a fresh battleship out of your ass somewhere in Egypt. No, you had to be, had to fit with the game and not screw with stuff.
That's what I meant with the fact that they don't mess with the ecosystem. They are perfectly aware that that's their content, and if they mess too much with that in any shape or form, they're going to destroy the gameplay.
So I'm just going to point out something. This is the first time that I've heard really a previous CCC dev actually really talk about the nitty gritty behind the scenes of what happened at CCP headquarters.
I'm sure that it's been talked about before in other interviews with active devs, so I don't see anything extremely novel about that. It's just that this is a specific topic that Carneros will know stuff about.
Yeah.
Yeah, outside the specific dev, because obviously he wasn't a game developer, but oh my God, if you get Darius Johnson started, he will not shut up.
I'll tell you. Hey guys, I'll tell you what is novel. We have Arendis here, who I've tried many times to get on talking in station. So
I'm not here.
It finally took McLeod. Took McLeod to get you on.
It was Caleb.
Casual nature and Caleb, yeah, essentially.
It was the salvage issue.
All about the salvage.
Yeah, I guess just to hit on the salvage thing and just to touch back on that, like I think salvaging is an activity that is so friendly to newer players, be it alpha clones or guys who sub but just haven't had time to accumulate a lot of skill points. It's always been fun, when I was out carrier ratting, I'd always get in comms and be like, hey, is there any cute newbie who just wants to follow behind me and hoover up all my wrecks? And you'd inevitably get one guy who would come in and be like, oh sure, this is something, I'll give it a try. Sometimes he didn't even have a ship, so it'd be okay, here, take a ship, I have one. And the guy would just start following behind me and go, oh man, I'm making so much money, I've made like 5 million on this site. I'm going, oh, you're so cute. So salvaging, I I would like to see, no matter what the changes that are made to it, if there are any, that it remains something that has a very low barrier of entry to get into, just because it is something that helps not only newer players make money, but also establish relationships between newer players and older players in such a way that's going to make those newer players want to stick around.
You almost start to develop some degree of mentorship between an older player and a newer player.
Yeah, just like many other things used to be in the past, right? Mining was like that the first 2-3 years of EVE, and you would have your new bros basically working on all the logistic stuff and shipping your mined ore back and forth, and then you would just strip belts from dawn till dusk, right? The point is to make it emergent, and I think that's what Robbie is on about, making sure that there's motivation between older players and newer players in all mechanics of EVE. There's always going to be a supply chain somewhere where you can use the extra man hours.
And I think salvaging should also be scalable. I mean, right now, salvaging is basically something that newbies do. And once you get past a certain point in your skill points, salvaging just isn't something you do anymore. And it doesn't really feed into anything except maybe industry if you go with the reprocessing skills. But like if you look at salvaging, okay, salvaging should feed directly into the archaeology stuff because it's fundamentally the same thing.
Oh, and maybe we should suggest that the Orca can do salvage boosting.
Salvage boosting would be amazing.
Well,
that would repurpose the Orca, right?
That would be a repurposing of the Orca, which has kind of fallen by the wayside, really, at the moment.
Or they create a new, Reaver
Noctis
salvaging.
Noctis.
Noctis, a salvaging, a set of salvaging ships that are all messed up. Scavengers of the galaxy.
That's what Noctis is, right?
With big holes that can only hold salvage, so you can also shoot them and get drops.
The glorious thing about salvage is it doesn't take up a lot of space.
Well, then you can have NPC salvagers, right? Just these scavengers that are around, and then you're talking about real rats.
Well,
it would be fun if the NPC salvaged your wreck.
the Orca's humiliating for it's used for boosting in high sec, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And also, what I've gathered, having not mined since I came out to Null for the first time, is that the Orca can function similar to like a high-sec Roquel in terms of what it can do mining on its own.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It mine's the equivalent of a Exhumer, I think they said it did.
So I'm kind of wondering if maybe the Porpoise shouldn't be, because it's already a Noctis hull, it shouldn't be the salvage booster.
That would be.
I think for there to be
booster then, right?
I think for there to be salvage boosting in general, you need to have some of the other changes we've been discussing, like the creation of wreck fields and turning salvaging into more like mining, where it's not just like a pass-fail chance for collecting whatever's there. It's something you have to keep.
Where skill actually affects what you get.
The thought that I had in terms of
tells you exactly how much value is in a field.
Exactly. The thought that I had in terms of like the wreck fields was essentially it seemed to be a more logical way of kind of approaching the sort of salvaging aspect of the game. The other kind of aspect of the game was it would also prevent some of this mentality of people having to sort of fly to that wreck in order to get the best X types. And the best sort of like, the best drop modules, the true Sancha kind of like warp disruptors and all that kind of thing. So it kind of gave more people a little bit more chance by kind of adding a bit more RNG to sort of the equation of like, maybe you might sort of, loot an X type, maybe you won't, but it's not entirely up to how fast your ship is.
I think when we're talking about scanners and stuff like that, I think what needs to be boosted is that it should be a little bit like the information you get back, whether you're ship scanning for loot or your salvage scanning or your ore scanning in a belt. you should get something back that you can basically look at in a similar way to the inventory, right? So you can search in it and you can get the complete price of different searches. So you can focus your activities. If you guys actually know what I mean.
Kind of, but
So
McClung touched on
all the
something.
types, right? All the types of salvage, right, would show up in a way that's exactly like it's in your hangar. So you can search for specific types of salvage to see how much of that is actually available, and you can get the entire quotes on how much value is in the entire wreck field.
I mean, it would be cool to have, like, in the sort of same way that you have like a like asteroid kind of scanner sort of thing in that regard. Like, it'll tell you how much of a certain thing is in the field, but it won't tell you where it is, and you won't be able to sort of click it to be able to kind of go, right, extract this kind of thing, but it will tell you that there is a percentage chance of you getting it, or that at least it's there for it to be removed.
So you know how much you get if you deplete the entire field, whether it's roids or loot or salvage.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff you can do with salvaging. I mean, as far as game mechanics go, there's a whole lot of stuff that could be put into this. Salvaging could be a very, very deep, very, very deep activity.
There's money to be made in trash. A lot of us are dying to be scavengers.
Like, when you scavenge capital ships, how often do you actually get the components that you need to build capital ships?
I think also the ratio of salvage on a big ship like that compared to a frigate, I don't know what actually gets salvaged, but it seems to me like it should be a completely different thing to salvage a big ship. It should take multiple salvagers to get those wrecks.
I did actually at one point when I went to sleep after through BTEC-R and then woke up and there were still things being blown up, I did actually end up salvaging things, and like there's a few kind of really strange situations going on when you're salvaging capital ships and even supers in that regard. Like, I was in a frigate, like I distinctly remember salvaging a Titan, and I was in a frigate at the time, and it, like, the salvage that I got from salvaging a Titan, like, it kind of filled probably about a third of my cargo hold in a frigate. That's just wrong. Like, that's wrong.
I think the point is about
but the other kind of
the result in value per cycle, right? It should take a long time to salvage a Titan or salvage a structure. It should feel like you're mining a roid, right? So the value per tick should be equivalent, and that would mean that you could actually come in and see a little fleet that's salvaging Titan wreck, which would just be awesome.
Well, that should be what your salvage fields are. They should leave a capital ship, blown up for hours and hours and hours, and then it should just become an asteroid belt for salvagers for a while.
Because I'll tell you one thing: there's nothing more immersion breaking in the middle of the wrecks of like a bunch of supers than an MTU dragging a Titan wreck at like 2,000 meters a second.
Yeah, that's weird.
Some of those
weird.
Stupid, easy quality of life ideas that they put in there to make things a little bit easier. They're just stupid. They destroy emergent gameplay, and it's just a balance problem.
Yeah,
but I really.
Sorry.
MTUs can be absolutely hilarious if you do it right. I mean, if you want to screw with a couple of miners in a high sec belt, you go and you drop 2 MTUs on either side of them, right at the limit of the MTU's range from one another. Someone will go to jet can. One of the MTUs will grab the can. It will drag it all the way over, and the other MTU will grab it and pull it all the way back.
Total trolley.
Yeah, also another fun thing that can be done with MTUs is you drop them in the middle of a fight where Asher Elias is on grid, and
then you lose the MTU.
Well, you get to hear people start saying in comms, "Hey, Asher, there's an MTU on grid. Do we want to shoot it?" And people start like egging him on, like, "Hey, let's kill the MTU."
I'm actually worried about the day when a hostile fleet uses that as a tactic. Hey, Asher, start dropping MTUs, guys.
Everybody drop an MTU.
Note
I think I need to go and buy a blueprint somewhere.
in Asher's fleets.
There we go.
If against Asher, drop MTUs, like like a little coding thing.
Well, I think McLeod mentioned something really interesting earlier, winding back. You mentioned something about, X types and salvage, which, while that's normally not something that comes around now, what would you guys think about changing the way looting from Rex works to where it's not just like a cargo container, you go up and grab what you want and then run away? What if that was changed to something where modules weren't dropped or destroyed, they had a chance to be pulled out of Rex via salvaging?
I think that actually makes sense, that it's part of the salvage, that loot goes into the salvage.
Agree.
But I think it should be scannable with ship scanner, so you scan for intact stuff, and it's 2 different quotes you get.
So something like intact modules and salvageable components.
Exactly. I think that would be awesome, because then scavenging would be a whole
Salvaging
new profession.
modules from Rex.
A
That would
lot
actually be
more
quite
fun.
cool. Yeah.
That'd be great. I mean, I can definitely see the whole, well, yeah, but we want to be able to loot Rex, and I would personally say that straight
The
up
Noctis
looting a
would get
wreck,
his job back.
straight up
I would
looting a wreck should just be whatever was in the cargo.
I would
If they balance
I'd approach the
if
problem.
they rebalance the drop rate, right, the whole loot tables, then it would also make sense to bring back gun mining. So you could maybe even on your Orca that's boosting, you bring a recycling module, so you can also recycle the guns if they're not worth bringing to market.
But how I'd approach the problem of people there being a literal barrier of entry of being able to loot the wreck field, as it were. I would essentially just make it as you can loot the wreck field. It takes you a long time, but having modules there that are specifically designed for that allows basically both speeds up the process and also increases the likelihood of pulling out something more valuable in that regard. It's always, so it doesn't mean that the value of being able to loot Rex or be able to loot Rex at the moment doesn't disappear just because you don't have the module specifically that's designed to loot sort of a loot field.
And they should reintegrate the metas into invention and into production of Tech 2 and faction stuff. So you get things like speed boosts or mineral demand boosts from using lower tiers.
Okay, so how about this? They remove the ability to shoot Rex, but have them deteriorate in HP over time.
That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But when you go and salvage it, you salvage you have a chance of salvaging what items were fitted to said ship at the time it was blown up, but anything that was in the cargo drops as a can. So you still go and loot haulers and shit like that and get all the cargo from them. But if you want to get the Rex, you have to go in, get the salvageable components from the Rex and the modules were fitted to it. But of course the modules would be damaged, they could be a bit burnt out or whatever, so you might have to take them away and repair them.
I think that also plays
that makes
MTUs
fun, right? Because they only go for cargo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the other thing is it also ties into what Caleb was talking about way back when he was talking about how you can kind of, better approach the idea of transporting goods in containers.
I was just going to say that, and you guys kept talking over me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it definitely would increase the need for people to do that. And the thing is, it also is doing it in the, we're looking fairly theoretical here, looking at it in a way that it's not necessarily going to inhibit older, more experienced players from doing what they're already doing, but it's creating some sort of structure where you do have better way of phrasing this. You do have a better way of creating relationships between older players and newer players, because it gives the newer players something that is valuable to both sides.
and all cans and containers should be hackable and be part of the hacking game. So you have to either pick it up immediately and bring it, or if you want to open it and get the content, you have to engage in the hacking game, which means that if you buy the more secure ones, then it's going to take them longer. It's a more difficult hacking game.
Oh, you mean like cans, somebody's cargo, as opposed to just like, a can floating out in space from a wreck?
Yeah, I would say that it would always drop in the minimum container that takes a little bit of time to actually hack and open. But secure cans or bought cans should take longer and actually create the whole take stuff and run, or open it and get the most expensive stuff in it.
I'm just waiting for somebody who does high-sec ganking to come in here and yell at us for being stupid. Because all these changes that we're just, all these like, oh, this would be so cool we're discussing, I can just see somebody in Mini Love just starting to froth at the mouth and going, oh, they're going to ruin everything.
When I did one of the immersion articles, the first one I think it was, where I was basically saying that for player retention, one of the things that you want to have is you want to feel like your actions are consequential, and so they need to have consequences. I got such pushback from people going, how can you actually want people to suffer penalties for high-sec ganking? What? Look, yes, you already suffer penalties. Big deal. None of the penalties are anything serious, because right now, okay, you gank somebody in high-sec, you don't dock up for half an hour. Tomorrow, you go and you spend like 2 hours making money by ratting, and you get back your security status.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and?
So where's the consequence?
Except the ratio's off. You need much more than 2 hours to make up the security status of a ganking gun.
Either way, I commit a crime. Okay, I commit a crime and my punishment is go make money. What?
So I guess then
There is that.
All right. Actually, I tell you what. And it was always, but that brings up an interesting point that kind of links to a thought that I've always had that I always thought really, really was weird. Like, no security space. I mean, nobody rats or whatever in low sec. It's all faction warfare and stuff like that, and that has implications with your security standing anyway. But if you go and rat in no security space where Concord doesn't exist, why do you get security standing for ratting in space they don't control?
Yeah, definitely. You should get get no security status just like you do with the sleepers.
Yeah.
No, see, that actually there's that all ties together with the solve system, because all of these pirates that you're going after, they're pirate organizations that Concord doesn't like, which is why there's bounties on them.
Yeah, but
you register the kills, but when you look at nullsec and you say, well, Concord doesn't exist out here. Of course Concord exists out there. Concord's in charge out there. Just nobody admits Concord's in charge out there, because what happens if you don't pay Concord your rent?
You lose your gas station.
True.
Which is unfortunate. But it does create content.
It's a lie.
Yeah, but still,
but
the concept of security status in nullsec is a bit.
I mean, but they pay you ISK. They pay you ISK for doing it. And if you do the
that's not the same
missions
thing.
for them,
it's like paying a mercenary.
You
hire, you pay somebody, you pay a group in a lawless area of the world, and you pay a guy to assassinate somebody you really don't like. Doesn't mean that the guys you paid are going to be invited in your streets.
Right, totally. But that's how you regain security status.
Yeah, I agree. But so I'm with you about the security status in nullsec. I'm okay with the nullsec just giving bounties and not security status.
There should be no.
That being said, people are going to farm security status doing incursions, which are already insanely good for security status, much better than nullsec. And I'm not sure I want to be behind making incursions even more OP.
There should not be any payout of ISK in null. It makes no sense. It should all be player versus player stuff. So you get your ISK from your workers that gets their ISK from selling stuff into high sec where the ISK is printed.
There's never going to be enough.
But that's a
I don't think
massive
that's gonna
change.
work.
That's a massive change that people would have to You'd have to figure out something that kind of at least semi alleviates that, because that kind of change is huge.
But it's
Yeah,
going to
that's the
happen on
kind of-
price.
that's
It's
the-
gonna
this is
happen on
never
price.
going- this is never
Imports
going to
imports
work.
to high sec to the players that don't actually play in null would pay the ISK. You would get the ISK anyways. It's just it should not be printed in null. It makes no sense design wise.
Well,
Actually,
if you go
it
that
does
way,
make sense. It does make sense to have high sec being the safest but least profitable region of the game. Whereas if you want to get the far west, and then you take more chances, but you make more money. I like the ISK versus reward part.
right? And
But you
Concord
get it from the
offering these
items you
bounties.
sell. You,
Right.
you don't get the point that you're not printing dollars in Saudi Arabia, maybe fake
No.
ones, but the point is that the dollars are printed in safe space, and then you buy stuff that's sourced in Saudi Arabia.
I think.
Sure,
Well,
but at the
technically,
same
you
time,
buy.
if you're... Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
I think from
the resources is made in like Saudi Arabia and you sell it in the US, but it works because you've got a market in the US. In New Eden, you're not going to have another market. You can have a lot of people who want to have more ISK, and the ISK is not going back to the economy if they stop playing the game. So you really need a way to be printing ISK. What we might disagree about is where the ISK printing is going to be taking place.
So,
and I think from a games design point of view, like in the fact that it's an encouragement of people playing the game, I think removing that from them would be too much of a it would take too much of a remote step for people to be making their money than it would for them to feel rewarded to play the game, and that might discourage people not.
But the value would just change onto the items that are sourced in null. I don't see why people don't understand this. It's the same with blue loot. You need to, if you take away blue loot tomorrow from wormhole space, the only thing that's going to happen is that everything that's sourced in wormholes will go up with the equivalent amount of it.
But,
Why?
like, what I would say is there,
No.
I
I don't see that at all.
Really?
But it would. That's exactly what would happen, because that's how things are evaluated in EVE.
No. In Wormhole, all the player bought commodities have dropped because people have been farming them like crazy. Blue loot is constant because we've got these NPCs who are printing ISK by buying the blue loot, regardless of the amount that is being farmed.
But
If you remove the blue loot, nobody's
it's
going
taking
to
value
it's
of
exactly-
the items. This is what you don't get. It's taking the value of the items that are sourced only in wormholes.
What? How so?
Because you have the ISK, so that means that your dependency on ISK is going to be reduced by that amount.
I'm
so,
sorry.
so
Have you
the
lived-
the exports,
No.
the import exports,
No,
the
no,
payment
no,
of balance
No.
is what's-
No. It's just the other way around. I lived in Wormhole for over 2 years in the C5. Originally, when I arrived there, it was 2013. About half of my income was from exploration sites, which were really paying out very well. You could have 400 million drop, that sort of things. And by the
that's
time
PvP drops. That's things you're
no,
selling to
that's
players.
PvE dropped in exploration.
No, it's things
sites.
you're selling to players. Everything.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
generates
And
as a
okay,
whole
absolutely. Bear with me.
thing in
Yeah,
Let
bear
me
with
finish
me.
the point.
2 years later, all these sites were worth 50 mil, and most of the 50 mil was the blue loot itself. The reason being that people were farming the gas, farming the exploration, and there wasn't a market anymore. The prices crashed. Blue loot remain because you've got that infinite pool of buyers, which is not the case for a player-driven economy.
And the only
Well-
difference between the blue loot and the bounties paid out in nullsec is that the bounties are paid directly. There's no item to transport, whereas the blue loot, it's an item that's transported and sold. You just get
There's a
the
little
ISK
bit of a
directly.
logistical thing, but from a macroeconomic point of view, it makes no sense to have ISK printing where you also have the majority of the raw value created.
Well,
But the majority of the raw value is not created in Wormhole.
let's
All the
take
specific
this moment,
items.
guys.
It is.
Let's take this moment to either agree to disagree. We'll kind of maybe jump into this topic on a later talking stations after show. But our kind of time is at an end, unfortunately. I'd love to.
Oh yeah, we're
keep this
5 minutes
going,
over. I'm sorry.
but,
Wait,
But yeah.
I actually wanted to say something.
oh God! All right, quickly.
He's been trying for
quickly,
like
man.
20 minutes.
Oh, hey, I own this shop. Oh, no, it's just the after show. I'm just like everybody else here. Wanted to say that Aerith just got back to us and said, "Oh, he missed the show. He would be on, so maybe we'll have him next week." And how many people we have watching now at the end of this thing? I'm out pruning the tree, so I don't know.
200 it seems, so, which is really good. And I'd like to thank everyone who has joined in watching and chatting and all that. But thank you very much, everybody, for watching. For all the donations that we had, both in Talking Stations and the after show, all the follows and all the subs as well, which is really, really cool. But that'll be it for this week in Talking Stations after show. We have some other shows a little later on this evening that you may want to check out. So for us in here, that'll be all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
It was awesome.